Lesson 11.1, Relations and Functions. A relation is a set of ordered pairs that relates an input to an output. An input is a number on which a function operates. Now, you do need to understand that the input is the x term. The output is a number produced by evaluating a function using a given input. So it's your y term. You can kind of think of it as a machine. You input the x term, you do some sort of operation or rule, and you get back the y. This is actually called a function. A function is a relation is a function if each input there's exactly one output. Very important to this. I would write this down. If the x values repeat, it is not a function. Domain is all of your x values. Y, a range is all your y values. On the side of your paper, I would write this. Your x values are called your input. Your y values are called your output. All of the x values are called your domain. All of the y values are called your range. Something that's not in our vocab is the word independent. X values are independent. They can be any number. They do not rely on anything. They can be any number. Where the y values are dependent. What you get for y depends upon what you put in for x. Again, you have this little machine. We actually can now call it the function machine. I input the x, I do my function, and what I get back is the y. So whatever I put in for the x here will affect what my y is. So that's why x is independent where y is dependent. Let's tell whether this relation is a function. So for example A, you can see this is not a function. Why? Remember I told you, look at the x values. Remember your x is x comma y. Because the x values repeat, it is not a function. If you get anything out of this section, you should get this. If the x values, not the y, it doesn't matter about the y, don't even care about the y's, but you can see these x values repeat, so it's not a function. It has two outputs. 2 goes into 6 and -4, 4 goes into 7 and -5. Let's try this one. Again, you're looking at your x values, which are your inputs. It doesn't even matter what the y is. Does this repeat? No. So it is a function. Please try number 1. Look at the the x values. Look at the x values. The y does not matter. Again, if the x value repeats, it is not a function. See Mrs. Shea for the answer. For number 2, again, is it a function? Look at the x values. The x repeats. It's not a function. Again, see Mrs. Shea for the answers. For example 2, we're going to evaluate a function. You have $16 to spend at the arcade. You spend $4 in food, and each game costs 50 cents to play. Here's the equation we're going to use. So they gave that to you. And I will give you the equation. Usually my equations will be y equals, and there'll be an x with it. But just think of the c and the g as the y and the x. First of all, we're going to put inputs. Now, these inputs can be any number. So on your practice, it might say to list 4 numbers for your input. You can put any number. Usually the numbers I would use though, and this is going to be for everybody, is I would use at least -1, 0, and +1. So you have a negative, a 0, and a +1. Okay, so most of the time use this when it's asking you to evaluate a function. So what I'm doing here is I'm taking my function, which is c equals, and I'm making this 3-column chart. This is probably the easiest way to do it. And I'm going to input for g, which is typically, usually, or x, the 0. So 50 cents times 0 plus 4. I'm going to solve this. 0 plus 4 is 4. I'm going to keep going with that same equation, 50 cents times 8 plus 4. 50 cents times 8 is 4. 4 plus 4 is 8. And we keep going down. Instead of the g, which is usually the x, but instead of the g, we're going to put in our input. This is 8 plus 4. And last, 24, which is 12 plus 4, which is 16. Now, remember, you only have $16 to spend, and that's your output, how much money you're spending. So because you only have $16 to spend, and we have the equation that every game is 50 cents, plus the $4 on food, I would say that you could spend about 24 you can play 24 games. And that's what they did here. That is your answer. We are going to skip example 3, so you are finished with this lesson.